Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Okay, well, we are back with Mick Mulroy and myself, Adam, here on Applied Stoicism, or Pub and Porch Applied Stoicism, I should say, with our name. So, welcome back, Mick. Thanks for talking today. Today,
Great to
we
be
were
with you.
going to talk about resilience and I guess keeping going is what a lot of people would say to that. So it's a term I think that's thrown around a lot right now. There's a lot of talk in the sort of sphere of sort of self-help or psychology or even sports and the military that uses that word. And Mick, you brought this one up as a topic for today, which I, completely agree is a very good topic to speak on. So we should probably open with a quick definition, though, to sort of set the groundwork for everybody. What do you mean by resilience when you think about talking about it?
So I think resilience, one, it's one of the cores of what I think of when I think of Stoicism, right? If there's a philosophy that best embodies the ability to endure hardship for the greater good, to persevere when others would quit, um, to have the self discipline to understand that hardships are going to happen, failures are going to happen, sickness, sorrows, but you have the desire and the capacity to essentially keep going and to never quit. You know, in the immortal words of Rocky Balboa, it isn't whether you're going to get knocked down, it's whether you're going to get back up. Right. So it's a long definition, but that's how I always saw it. Yeah, I used to coach boxing, but boxing, there's a lot of analogies in boxing for life, right? You don't have to be a boxer to get, you don't have to be a boxer to get, you're going to get knocked down. That's just part of life. Um, and it's not something you should be embarrassed about. It's not something you should, carry with you forever in your failures, but you should look to surpass it, to overcome it. And that might be the proudest thing you've ever done in your life, right? I had a time and it just came to me. Um, so my son, when he went to what's called the basic reconnaissance course, which is an extraordinarily difficult military course, it's for Marine Force Recon. Um, he went super young. He was just 18. Normally, it's by people who have been in the Marine Corps for a while. So they're about 23, 24, 25, which seems like, for us old guys, or speaking for myself, it's like, what's the difference? It's a big difference between 18 and 24. You know what I mean? Maturity wise and experience wise. Anyway, so he's a tough kid, but he looked like a sophomore in high school. I mean, he was just a goofy looking, uh, not goofy, but he looked like younger than he was, and he looked young. I mean, he was young. I'm trying to give you the mental image here. And he just cruised through it. He was just a tough, physically tough guy. And I think at the end, the instructors were like, how the hell did this, whippersnapper get through this? And they told him, he went through their final version the last week. It's just total pain and agony. And then he was just told at the end, hey, we're going to make you recycle the last phase, which is common, but they didn't even tell him why. Right? They just said, because you look like you're too young to do this shit. Right? So, and they said you can either wait 2 weeks or you can pick up tomorrow because there's a class picking up in this last phase tomorrow. I mean, yeah, tomorrow. And he said, yeah, I'm going tomorrow. Bring it. Right. And then he called me and he was, he kept his, he probably don't want me telling people this. He kept his stuff in one sock for the whole time he was, being told um, he was have to be recycled, but he got a little emotional when he was talking to me. And I just told him, hey, man, this right here is the proudest I'll ever be of you right now. Right? It's a tough thing for a father to hear. But to me, that's the epitome of resilience. So I know I'm making it personal. It's about my son and stuff, but it's stuff that I think everybody can relate to. Certainly parents, but it also happens to you, and it's going to happen. And you're never going to avoid. In fact, if you intend to do nothing, um, then you might be able to avoid hardship. But if you intend to make a difference, you are never going to
Hmm.
be able to avoid hardship. So it's
Yeah.
the mental capacity, it's the physical and moral toughness. And I was just reading. This is the Stoic lessons from Rufus. For people who are looking, look at lecture 7. Lecture 7 basically says, in a nutshell, everything worth pursuing is going to cause you hardship and you're going to have to overcome something. That's essentially what it's saying. Everything good requires an effort and the ability to surpass
Hmm.
what you might have thought you can do.
Yeah.
So to me, that's kind of the way I see resilience. I think it's one of the reasons why people come to Stoicism, either because they've already had a failure, and we're going to talk about um, examples, real
Hmm.
life personal examples, real life examples that people I think would understand from history. But at the end of the day, it really is from the beginning to the end, from the alpha to the omega. For me, that is what Stoicism is about, and you can see it in every aspect of your life.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story. I mean, it's obviously very personal to you. We we definitely have to talk about these things because it's funny, I was talking to somebody about this podcast and how we were starting it and what the theme was, and I said, it's real life. It's meant to be real life philosophy, right? And so the real life comes with those tough moments. I think even when someone is not going to take a public life stance, you know what I mean? Like even when someone's not going to be do something like you and I are doing, or be in politics or whatever, right? They're still going to face these tough moments. It's all about matter of degree, right? Not everybody's on the front lines in a war zone, but everybody is going to face tough moments to them. And I think the one thing that resonates from what you were saying at the start from your boxing, right, is that you are going to get hit, right? You are going to take that hit. And your son, obviously, he knew he was going to have a tough go because obviously that's a very tough course, right? So, and I think it's important for people to remember that we all take those tough hits. So, but it doesn't matter that you get hit. Like I come from Canada. We always talk about hockey. I don't play hockey
Mm-hmm.
anymore, really, but we always talk about ice hockey. And it's a physical game. You're going to get hit.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not. I don't appreciate the fighting in hockey now. It's very very pumped up now, but it's a physical game. You're meant to take a hit. I played rugby for many years, which I know is common in a lot of the military academies now in
Oh
the
yeah.
states, right?
Yeah. Rugby's
Yeah, and it's
big.
you will get hit. There will be some hurt, there will be some pain, but toughness is really important in those moments. I think if we were getting academic, in some ways, this just comes down to that regularly talked about concept, which is the premeditation of adversity, right? Premeditatio malorum, as that's Latin, but it's basically we looking ahead to the bad things that are going to happen. That doesn't mean that you have to catastrophize it, but knowing that it's going to be tough
Mm-hmm.
is important. But I think there's an interesting part of that which I would love to get your input on, which is your son at the end of his course didn't know that he was going to go through another recycle. He didn't know that that was going to happen. So I know we're jumping right into the personal anecdotes of you and I, but like when you have that immediate change, right? What's something someone can do, right? I mean, like I know that I've gotten that question a lot. My nephews, for example, have struggled with, we get to the store and it's closed. We miss the movie because we're too late, right? We can't watch the show because we screwed up the time on the calendar, right? So in your mind, like how does that come into effect too? Because when going into something, and I'm not saying it was easy for your son, but when going into something it's going to be hard, that's one thing. But what happens when that adversity pops up unexpectedly, right? I think it's something else that we should talk about because that's something I think a lot of people struggle with. I know I have myself.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Part of it, I think, is preparation, right? So if you look at it's part of its preparation, and another part is taking it as a challenge. The whole obstacle is the way that Ryan wrote a whole book on, and has become super popular. Ryan Holiday, that is, um, it's become super popular with athletes, right? But it applies to everybody, right? This isn't just about athletes and soldiers and stuff. Um, it's preparation, so it's kind of making yourself mentally tough, uh, and physically tough. And Rufus talks about it a lot. And to the extent that his lectures were captured by his students, that you don't wait until the event to try to make yourself physically and mentally tough. And I don't, and like you bring up a lot, and I think it's worth noting. I mean, Stoicism isn't about being some kind of robot without emotions. Obviously, um, you know, uh, people have emotions, and it's about controlling them and using them for the right purposes. Right? It's not about losing your mind and screaming at somebody at an intersection. It's about controlling that, right? I mean, a lot of people have that feeling. Um, but part of being a stoic is the ability to control it. The other part, I think, when it comes to hardships that are going to hit you in life, inevitably, the longer you live, it is clearly going to happen, is being prepared for it, and being prepared by knowing, what's really important and what really isn't, focusing on what you can control and not what you can't. I mean, think about how many times you've seen people that are super frustrated and upset talking about something over and over and over again that they have no control over. It's like you're causing yourself all this agony and anxiety, and you have no ability to affect changing it. Right. So, I mean, that's also a core of Stoicism, is focus on what you can accept or what you can control, and not just, and this isn't just for everyday people. I think a majority of the people that are going to listen to us are, folks, everyday folks just like us. But this is also for people who have failed miserably, and sometimes to their own fault, right? Stoicism can also help those, right? Um, those people who have either had substance abuse or made terrible mistakes, went to jail. I mean, went to prison. There's a whole movement in prison right now of Stoics, and I know several of them. There's the UK prison system has really allowed Stoicism to take root, and it's part of the rehabilitation process. So this isn't just the everyday stuff of life. This is stuff that um, people who have failed for
Yeah.
their own reasons, for their
Yeah.
own, their own
Yeah.
um, fault, to
Hmm.
put direct fault on it. And I think that's also part of resilience. You build up resilience from your own faults and from your own
Hmm.
lessons learned, right?
Yeah.
Um, what was it? A famous Oscar Wilde quote: "Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future." Right? Um,
Right.
that's something that I think we should also talk about as Stoics, because we're not just here for the people who are going to be the next CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or
Yeah.
the next, general, or what have you. It's
Yeah.
everybody, and that's what we
Y-
want to do.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I think many times we speak about these things like we're all sages, and that just isn't the case, right? We all struggle with these things. We all find these tough times, right? The ability to keep moving, I think, is the important one, and that's sort of what you were saying, like keep moving. And what do we mean by keep moving? I my team members, especially some of my young team members that I in the safety team that I lead, they struggle sometimes with the with whatever keep moving means, and it's like, well, what's the end goal here? Because just because it means that you're going to do this a different way now, as long as you're getting towards that end goal, that's important, because what you control is what you control is doing the work. I mean, whether or not someone else disagrees with what you've done, I mean, that's 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 fine. But at the same time, like, do you agree with it? Do you think it still stands? And pushing ahead with that doesn't mean push ahead blindly saying I'm right, right? But it does mean the sense of if you've rationally looked at it and reasoned yourself towards this goal and this action, then you should be able to do that. Paraphrasing, I think it was Marcus. I think I've said this before. It might have been Socrates. Now that I think about it, they sort of praised, like, it doesn't matter whether you do journal or you do meditate or you do whatever. All that matters is that you're trying, right, and you keep going forward. And I think that's a key point. I'm sure when your son was going through that you called it recycle, I think, right, where he
Yeah,
goes
you
back
have to
through that
do
last
like a
cycle.
phase over. It happens a lot in Ranger School too, which he
Right.
did as well. Yeah.
Right. So if you do, I'm sure when he's doing that, he wasn't so much sure that he was going to finish it the
Nope.
second time, right?
Nope.
But I'm sure he would have thought, well, all I can do is try. I can give the effort, right? And in some, I talk a lot. I'm sure he finished that second round, and
He did.
and and amazed everybody, because I do know a little bit about your son. You and I have spoke about him before, but what I'm really getting at is, like, as long as people are given the effort, I mean, that's at least half the battle, if not more. And I think that's really important. You just have to try. Like, are you going to lose your temper and yell at somebody when you don't want to? Yes. Are you going to stumble and break the vase that you were trying not to break? Sure. But I mean, what do you do next? I think is really, in some ways, key for me. You just keep moving forward, as per your Balboa quote. And I think that to me has always resonated, right? I'm not so much a no person. I don't really like the idea that everything should be halted because someone disagrees with something. I always want to know, like, well, where are we trying to get to? So the answer is no right now, but what can we get to and go forward? And so when I talk to a lot of people about this, I try to retain this idea of just, like, you got to move, just keep going somewhere with it. It's not, now, this doesn't always work. Let's be honest. I'm sure someone's going to want to give that comment, right? It doesn't always work. Sometimes it is wrong, and you have to totally go back to the drawing board. But even
Hmm.
that is doing something, right?
Yeah.
You can still
Yeah.
move forward. To quote President Bartlett from the show The West Wing, right? It's what's next, right? He's like, okay, can't do that, can't get that bill through, can't solve peace in this area of the world, but what's next, right? And I think that's something that's there. I just it's easy as people, and we use this in my world a lot, to get stuck in what's called analysis paralysis, right?
Hmm.
Where you are consistently just like, how do I move forward? I don't know what's going on with this or with that. It's always like, well, sometimes you just got to give it a shot. And the toughness and resilience is not getting it right. I think people think that's what it is. We're not Superman with bullets glancing off of us. That's not really how life is. It's more the case of, are you making progress? Are you moving the needle to, I'm using all the analogies because those are ones that come up a lot in my world. Moving the needle
Hmm.
on the tack, or on the Mach meter or whatever. And I think that's what I talk about a lot with people, is the toughness side of it, of keeping going forward. I always try to continue the conversation if someone disagrees with me, to be like, all right, well, tell me why. Let's hash that out. And they usually freeze a bit, and you go, no, no, you have a feeling about that. Let's work it out, right? So,
Yeah.
anyways, I'm not sure if that made a lot of sense, but it is interesting to sort of get to these points where so many people, because you and I both, I'm not sure what your experience is like, but a lot of people ask me my opinion on stuff. I don't know why. I'm not sure why. They just sort of say, well, what should I do in this circumstance? I'm always like, I would love to discuss it. I don't know if I'm the right person to talk about it. But when I end up talking about it with people, so many times over, I'm just like, okay, well, what can you do next? What's your next step? Because trying is, the big thing. I'm not going to quote Yoda here. Let's not go into the do or do not. There is no try. There is try. You either do it and it fails, or you do it and it doesn't fail, but it's all trying. So,
It
but
is.
what do you,
And
yeah, what do you
one of the
think though?
things I think we could do for the next generation or every generation after that is actually teach resilience. Right? We don't really do that. We actually try to make everything, um, obstacle free for our kids today. And I don't know that that's setting them up for success because as soon as they get away from being told that everybody's the winner and gets a trophy and, never tell my kid that he failed at something, they hit real life and they're slapped in the face because real life isn't going to act like a helicopter parent. Real life isn't going to tell you you're right when you're wrong.
Yeah.
Um, the courses and, I'm familiar with military stuff and, intel stuff. They set the courses up to do that. In fact, the reference I made from uh, Walton was the course is designed to do that. It's actually
Hmm.
designed to recycle people, and so are a lot of other military courses, plenty that I
Yeah.
went through. Because and they don't even, it might not even be for something you did. They just want to see how you react.
Yeah.
Because if you go, okay, I failed, so screw it, I'm not doing this anymore. These people suck. I'm going home. They say bye because
Yeah.
they don't want people that they want to see what you do when you either did fail or
Yeah.
they just say, hey, you failed because I don't like the way you look. I don't mean that like physically, but they just do it to see how
Yeah.
you react. And
Yeah.
I've been to plenty of courses like that where uh, you they just, and I think that we could do more, not just for our military members, but our business members or scientists,
Yeah.
and have some kind of version of that in when they grow up. I mean, I even talked to an Israeli once and said they won't put people in significant command who haven't failed before. And I'm like, what? Sounds like you're going to end up with a bunch of commanders who, you know, were not the best because they failed.
Yeah.
They're like, no,
Yeah.
no, everybody fails. If you're not failing at all, then you're probably not pushing it,
Yeah.
right? You're not pushing the envelope. You're just staying in your comfort zone. And that's not, one of the persons that I think who's certainly has his faults, but is always brought up when it comes to this is Winston Churchill. Churchill failed his first two entry exams into the Sandhurst Military Academy. He was held responsible for Gallipoli, which was a completely failed military operation in World War One. He was
Yeah.
exiled for like 7 years politically. And after being the principal leader that won, World War II, at least against the Nazis and
Hmm.
defeated fascism, he was elected, he was thrown out of office.
Yeah.
Yet he's considered by almost every historian as one of the most significant leaders in human history.
Yeah.
Certainly um, during his time period. But actually, if you just Google leadership throughout history, his name is almost always, and
It's always tied. Yeah.
it's tied. And I think part of it, one is because rhetorically you can't beat Churchill. I mean, you could quote him all day long.
Great
And I
speech
don't
writer,
want
that's for
to,
sure.
he was not the perfect person, right? He had some racial issues. I'm pretty sure he didn't like the Irish at all. Um,
Yeah.
but you have to appreciate him for what he was, which is a person who never said die, right? He never
Right.
gave up. He was shot several times in combat, awarded for it, decorated for it. He
Yeah.
failed so many times, yet he kept coming back. And his leadership during World War II was as noble as Leonidas of the
Mm.
Spartan era. In the
Yeah.
modern era, I would say President Zelensky of Ukraine, is
Yeah.
very Churchillian.
Hmm.
He too has, had his ups and downs. But I think if somebody that we could all look at and see as a model for this, and yeah, and Churchill quoted Stoicism all the time, and he read
He did. Yeah.
all the Stoic books. He was, I think, sometimes we use people as an example of Stoicism that didn't consider themselves Stoics. I
Yeah.
actually think Churchill would have fell squarely into people who acted Stoic who would have considered themselves at least a follower of the philosophy, and I think Churchill
Sure.
is one of them. But there's other uh, big examples. out there. But Churchill is the
Yeah.
one, I think, because he failed so epically, you know,
Yeah.
um, that's what people should look at. I mean, how many times you lost an election, and
Yeah.
but we're not all going to be the prime minister of England, but we'll all have those trials and tribulations in our life.
Hmm.
And are we going to quit and just take our ball and go home, or are we going to figure out what we did wrong and try to do better next time and look at
Yeah.
the whole as a test, like Rufus said, or Aurelius said, it's a test. You need to look at this as, the obstacle is the way,
Yeah.
not just as something you have to endure, but take it straight on the chin and keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I think the from that quote, I think the key thing is what does it really mean, right? The obstacle is the way does not mean that you give up. The obstacle is the way means that the obstacle is part of where you're trying to go to now. So enough of trying to go straight, you're going to have to go around it or over it or through it or under it or turn out and go back and make another plan and come back again. But, I think that's a really important part of it. Working in the space program, right? It's a weird job. I'm going to be honest with you. You talk about weird stuff. Like my partner likes to make fun of the fact that I have to think about space fungus, right? But the thing
Right.
is that the space program is one of those things where risk is built into the job, right? You are entering an environment that is literally going to kill you at
Mm-hmm.
every turn. There's no air. It's not warm enough or it's too warm. There's radiation that'll cook your brain, right? There's all of these things that are out there. And what I'm not saying is go, hell's bells and never think about these things. That's not what Stoics would say. But it is the case if it's like, I know these things are present. I know these things are there. And I'm going to make a decision to address those things, work with them, work around them, through them, over them, under them, and keep going forward. That is toughness, right? And I think that's really important. When you look at, it was like from Kitty Hawk and the Wright brothers to the landing on the
Mm-hmm.
moon, it's like 50 years or 60 years, right? It's tiny. And
Yeah.
it's
Good
one of those
point.
things where, from the invention of the candle to the invention of electricity is like thousands of years. You know what I mean? So it's
Mm-hmm.
a very truncated period, and the space program has a long history of doing that, of literally. And when I do failure modes analysis, when I do whichever, I am literally putting my assumptions out there. My assumption is the radiation is going to be bad. There's going to be, if you're going around the moon, there's going to be what we call lunar regolith or moon dust, right? We're going to talk about extreme cold, extreme hot, pressure changes. Even though you're in space, there is pressure differentials at different
Sure.
times, right? We're going to talk about human error. We're going to talk about mechanical failures. We're going to talk about all this stuff. And I think a lot of people can learn from that approach because we don't ignore it. We look it straight in the face. And that's what I think the obstacle is the way is. I know it's cold outside, so we're going to have a heater. I know it's going to be too hot, so we're going to be able to turn off the heater, right? And it sounds ridiculous when you put it down like that, but it's so
No.
specifically applicable to everything in some ways. It's just this idea of like, I know there's going to be a tough thing to that, but then toughness is working with that. And I think that's something that anybody could kind of look at, right? So like even if you look at the mundane, I mean, I spent this week in PowerPoint land, right? Where it's like, well, the problem is that, well, we might put something on a slide and they might disagree with it. And I go, okay, what's that? What does that mean? Does that mean that we're dead in the water? No, it means they're going to disagree with it, right? And the toughness is not, because if we were too scared to do everything, we'd never do
Exactly.
anything.
You'd
And I think
never
that's really
landed on the
important for
moon.
people to think about. Yeah. So I mean, one of the key things for me is always going to be just like, and I've spoken about this before, so you might remember this already. But there's a part of my personal philosophy which is a Zen concept called beginner's mind, which comes from the phrase, "The mind of the beginner has many questions, while the mind of the expert has few." And
Mm-hmm.
I and it's funny saying this out loud because I usually don't tell people that I do this because it gives me a bit of a one up in some ways, but is that I go into a room and I'll be like, I don't know anything. I know nothing about this. Tell me everything you know. And so many times people will tell you all this stuff, right? And in the engineering world, it's very common to find these persons who they never want to make it sound like they don't know something because
Right.
you have to know everything. But you and I'm sure you're going to have had these experiences as well. We can't know everything. You don't know
Nope.
everything. I don't know everything. We're having this conversation to learn from each other at the bare minimum, as well as the hopeful many listeners that we'll have. But ultimately, you know, I learn more from saying I don't know, right? Because it's and that I think takes toughness as well. Is someone saying
Yeah.
I don't know, help me, or someone saying I don't know how to do this. Let's take a look at it, right? And when a lot of people, what I'm hearing in this sort of dollar sign stoicism and broic world and stuff like that, is this, you got to be perfect, man. And I've never subscribed to that mentality. I've always believed that toughness and true growth and personal gain and whatnot comes from the hard stuff and falling down and having to get recycled and having to get, do it again or to fail a course. Like a lot of people don't know this about me, but I flunked out of university for engineering. Um, and I spent a little time driving a forklift. And
Hmm.
frankly, I use what I learned driving a forklift a lot more than I use the advanced linear algebra that I took in school, right? But it is one of those things where, like, I never gave up on that goal of wanting to work in a high technology field.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is just its toughness is not you just people will say don't crumble under pressure or whatever, but what does that really mean? In fact, sometimes I think, in some ways, and I'd love your input on this. Sometimes I think you have to crumble a bit. You have to crumble to get rebuilt and be stronger, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I agree. Sometimes you have, well, you have to accept your own responsibility, right? If not for you, for people that you care about. Like I remember a guy talking to me once about how he got his friend to stop drinking, right? So he was a lot of people deal with PTSD in different ways, and I think probably alcohol's the oldest oldest way of dealing with um, what we now call PTSD. And this guy was an alcoholic himself, and he had given up the drink, as they say, um, for several years. And then he saw a friend who was kind of cycling down the same path, older guy, and went to talk to him. And the guy had, like shots lined up in front of him. Uh, and he's trying to talk the guy and, hey, you got all these things that you need to live for, and this will eventually end up killing you. Basically, what was he saying? Because this is beyond, just a guy that drinks too much and shoots his mouth off. This was a guy who's going to physically die from it. Um, and said the guy just was like impervious to anything he brought up about what was worth living in life. And so he finally took one of the shot glasses and he put it in front of himself. And the guy said, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then he took his bottle of whatever he was drinking and poured himself a drink. And he said, "You drink that, I drink this." Right? And he said, the guy was like, "Shit, man, you've been sober for years, dude. You've got your life back on track. Because you drink that, I drink this." And I'm not saying I'm not a therapist, so don't take this for like what you should do. But he said the guy finally just said he just took his glass and tipped it over with his hand and said, "I get your point. I'll go with you to the rehabilitation center." Right. So my point being is, at least from my friend's perspective, and I knew both of them, the guy didn't care about himself. So nothing he could tell him was resonating until his friend, he realizes he was going to drag his friend down with him. I don't know whether I asked my friend, "Were you going to drink it or not?" He said, "Well, I was going to have to because I had like gone already
yeah,
past the Rubicon there. I was going to have to drink it, right?"
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so if so it's I think it as far as resilience, what's the point of that story? The point is resilience can take the form of many motivations, right? And In this case, it took the motivation of, I don't care so much about myself, but I care about my friend. And if I take this drink, he will too, and he'll go back down the same path, and therefore I won't. And this person didn't. I still know him both. He didn't drink again. Actually, he thought therapy and or rehabilitation, and it worked. Uh, but he had to find a reason, right? So if you think about the famous quote where you can find hope, there's always a reason. I think I'm misquoting it, but you get the point. Um, that's what he found with his friend, right? So again, this is for your everyday person who tries to get a promotion at work and doesn't work out. It's for the athlete that didn't make the team but's going to work harder and try again next time. But it's also for people who failed miserably, sometimes for their own reasons, for their own blame. uh, Resilience is something you never give up on. That's the point of resilience. And you can always prepare for it starting now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we take a quick pause so that we can get ready for part two, which was something about a topic I was going to bring up along the lines of resilience. But
Yeah.
we'll take a quick pause here. I'll edit this part out, but it's just to give us. I don't want to have to
Yeah.
do two recordings. There's no point. So,
Yep. Yep.
okay, well, we're back talking about resilience and toughness. And one thing that I wanted to talk about today was the concept of resilience as I think about it from the engineering world, which is sort of an odd concept in itself. In the engineering world, resilience is the ability for something to return to its original shape. If anyone knows the Challenger disaster, that's a very famous time where resilience was not met by something. The O-ring that sealed in the hot gases from the inside of the solid rocket boosters was not resilient at certain temperatures. So if you squished it, it did not return to its original shape, and it let hot gases through, and that burned through and led to the catastrophic event that was Challenger. And it was actually demonstrated during the Rogers Commission hearings by um, Richard Feynman using a
Mm-hmm.
piece of the O-ring and a glass of ice water and a clamp. And I look at resilience in the same way here. Now, interestingly enough, I don't think anybody can go through these tough moments and return exactly to how they were before. I think if they were doing that, it removes the wisdom that you get from learned experience that Mick was already talking about earlier, right? You learn from all of these tough moments. You crumble a bit, you build yourself up, you get back up and keep moving, and you're a little smarter, you're a little wiser. But I do think resilience of getting back to the action you're trying to take, even when you stumble, that's the way that I look at it. And I think for me, I look at resilience in that way because it's the most re- easily repeated way in my mind of how to keep moving forward, especially for those everyday persons who are dealing with their car broke down, they didn't get the job, you know, they're stuck in the rain, didn't make, missed the date with the girl, whatever it is, right? And those things are minor, right? I will agree. I think a lot of us would say it's minor, but it can be feel very important and major at the time. But I think, for me, resilience is this ability to come back to that. And how you do that in many ways, I think, is that idea that you have to have the expectation to kind of learn. But what I want to focus on talking about now, because this is a conversational podcast with you, Mick, is how do you how do you talk about hard stuff without crumbling? Because it's so easy for people when they talk about these things that they feel embarrassed or ashamed because they didn't make it through. So I would imagine you were talking earlier about your sons. They made him recycle a part of the course. That was a very tough conversation to have with you because you're his dad, right? And he's
Mm-hmm.
probably sitting there going like, "Oh, I got to tell my dad they want to make me do it over. I don't even know what I did wrong." Maybe is something that somebody
Yeah.
might say in that
Yeah, and
circumstance.
it's always tough to talk about, and for those that aren't parents yet, but it will be.
Yeah.
you'll see it's like whatever happens to you, kid, happens to you, and even more so. Like it's
Yeah.
even more like it's more like you would rather, if your kid gets hurt, you'd rather just like take the pain, just give it to me and I'll deal with it.
Yeah.
It really does change your perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I failed plenty of times, and I think I got up and persevered, and I probably had less of a emotional reaction to that than when my kid was worried that he had failed,
Yeah.
and that I would be, you know, um, embarrassed, not embarrassed, but
Disappointed type
that
of thing.
he let me down was what he
Yeah.
was kind of saying, right?
Yeah.
Um, that and my point of telling the story is that in times like that, you really set the standard for who you are. Like
Hmm.
it reveals who you are to everybody, which is why they use it so much in leadership training,
Yeah.
right? If you fall apart when you fail, then you will fall apart, period, because you will fail. You see what I mean? So, I mean,
Yes.
there's even one, it's a small thing, but it's like this, it's a weird obstacle course where you got to do it as a team that the Marine Corps uses. And apparently it came from Germany, but and you probably like it because I think engineers do really well at it. It's like you have certain things and you have to make something work to get across a river
Yeah.
or things like that.
Okay.
Well, it's designed that eventually you can't figure it out. There's no answer. So you go through all these things, and at first you're like, "Oh, we figured it out. Aren't we smart?" And then it gets more and more complicated, and you have to really work together because one, you can't actually do the obstacle unless you work together. So it's a good. They could use it. They should use it in school, right? It doesn't have to
Yeah.
just have a military application. In fact,
Yeah.
it could totally be any leadership. We should teach leadership much better in actual primary school and then
Yeah.
college. Um, but anyway, the whole point at the end, and they don't tell you this until way later. Somebody else tells you, by the way, you can't solve it. Like, but you got to the 10th
Yeah.
stage, there's no solving it. But it's also to
Yeah.
see what you do. Do you fall apart and start banging on the ground and you turn on each other? That's what happens almost all the time. It's the other guy's fault. Well, you don't got an answer, but it's that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So the whole point of it is to reveal yourself.
Yeah.
And if you did fall apart, start acting like, a baby, or start blaming the other guy, or just turning in internal. There's kind of different personalities. Some personalities project against other people, some absorb it and
Yeah.
beat themselves up. Neither is really helpful. And
Hmm.
I am a big proponent of that. That actually, I can't remember what it's called, but you could probably Google it. I think they should teach that in high school,
Yeah.
right? It's how to make leaders and followers, because you got to be able to do both. You have to be,
Yeah.
a person that can be a follower and a good one, dedicated, loyal, committed, whether you're in charge or not. And you have to be the leader that sets the example. If your people are going to work, 60 hours a week, your ass better be working 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
That's what they call servant leadership. And it
Yeah.
shouldn't just be in the military, right? That's military is just one faction of society. That's what I'm most
Yeah.
familiar with, but it's not the end all be all. They could teach all of this stuff in basic leadership, whether you were a teacher, an engineer for a
Hmm.
space program, or you run a dry cleaning business.
Yeah.
There's core
And
principles of leadership.
absolutely. And I ascribe my own personal leadership style to servant leadership. I think the term I use a lot of the time is leaders eat last, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of they need to get done first. But I think if we could pick on something from that course that you've got, which does sound really interesting, and I'd be interesting to see if they have videos of it or something like that, is is also this idea of like talking about it, right? I think what I get from the course that you were describing in that line of thought is that they need you to talk to each other, right? They need you to say this stuff out loud. And I think it's really interesting because Stoicism is inherently a philosophy that is meant to be discussed, right? We're not dogmatic in the way of this is what we are. yes, we have core virtues, right? But I
Yep.
mean, even Socrates would always say, if you think there's other ones, right?
Hmm.
Or Marcus would say as well, if there are other virtues, then they should exist. But these are the most universal ones that we've got. And I
Sure.
think talking about it is a very important part of it. Now, the way I interpret that, and this is something if we talk about leadership and how you deal with this toughness, is like when stuff sucks, it's okay to say it sucks. I think, right, is something that's
Yeah.
really important. I'm sure when you were going through basic, or when if you ever did any of the courses like your son did, there were times you were like, "This is fucking horrible,"
Oh
right?
yeah. 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 I've been plenty of that, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I've spent a little bit of time reading the writings of someone named Steve Magnus, and he wrote a book called Do Hard Things, and he talks about this football team that in the 50s they had a perfect season, and this classic football 1950s football of like never give in, never surrender, the coaches barking orders, you're doing this wrong, da 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 da, and they did have a perfect season. But he was talking about how, interestingly, after that season, they they had like the worst season ever. They did that, so that it only worked for one season. So it
Hmm.
works in the short term, it doesn't work in the long term. And what Magnus has studied is the more this idea of like it's okay to say that it's tough. He's a NCAA track coach, I think. Originally, that was his big thing alongside his psychology work. He was sort of saying like there's a thing about top level runners where they know when it sucks and they go, "Oh, this sucks because it's hard," but then they just kind of keep going because they talk themselves through that tough moment. And I have used that in some of these tough conversation moments with my team, for example, where it's like they when we're talking with someone who disagrees with us in the safety world, you get into a lot of debates because you essentially have to grade other people's development work, right? To say like, is it safe? Have you built in the right redundancies or the systems in place? People struggle with that, and I'm known for saying in these meetings, I'm like, I know this sucks. I know it sucks. You and I don't agree on this, but like we are getting somewhere. And I think it should be okay to talk about that. And I think this resonates with me with the basic Stoic principle as well of just like you're never gonna you're not perfect. You're never gonna not have these bad things happen. They will happen, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And I guess I wanted to lead to this part of the conversation about talking about it because I think it's important that people understand that you can talk about it. You were quoting me earlier about saying we're not robots, and I think that's a very important thing here. Like we people imagine us as these bulwarks that everything glances off of us and we have no response to them, and I don't it just that's never been the case. Marcus writes in the meditations about the emotions that he feels quite deeply,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean that he wasn't tough and didn't fight. It doesn't mean that he didn't fight the Marco Manni on the Danube on the frozen river, right?
That's
As
right.
if you Donald tells that story in his book about Verissimus. But ultimately, I think it's very important to think that that dialogue with yourself is okay to have. I think a lot of people go through this shame cycle where they're like, this sucks and I'm doing really badly. And then they start to go, I suck at this because I'm doing badly. And then they're like, I suck. And then they go, feel shame because I suck and I'm bad at this and I should feel shame for this. When in reality, this is all normal. And the dialogue that we have with each other and with ourselves is something that's very important and it's okay to have. So it's hard to verbalize this. I've never talked about this, and that's one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast with you, Mick, because I never get to talk about this type of stuff with
Hmm.
other people. But I'm curious your thoughts on that, though, about that dialogue with yourself, because I think it's like the average person is going to have an inner dialogue with themselves as they go through tough moments.
Yeah, I think part of the resilience is having that inner dialogue. It's actually having it. It is one, not being so shocked when something slaps you in the face. If you accept that it's going to happen, because whether you accept it or not, it's still going to happen. But if you understand that and not live in Shangri La, at least in your mind, then you start building that resistance. I always thought, I'll bring this movie up because I always felt it was exceptional. I've sent it to other friends, and they look at more for the survival part of it. But if you ever seen the movie The Gray, It's got Liam Neeson. He's like a sniper who crashes in Alaska, and he's he basically becomes the alpha wolf in the humans, and they're getting chased by wolves. And I've always
Yeah.
had a
Yeah.
fascination with wolves, right? If you're looking
Yeah.
on
Me
YouTube,
too.
um, that's the name of our company, Lobo Institute.
Yeah.
But the point is, the reason why I like it so much, on top of the exceptional acting, is the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's the end, which I always viewed as like the perfect Stoic stand. And
Mm-hmm.
why I mean by that is, he's the last one, right? Every other human's dead. He's running for his life, and he falls face down in the snow. He gets up and he realizes, oh, damn, I'm actually in the wolf's den. I am now surrounded by wolves. And then the alpha male wolf comes walking out of the woods, and it's him against him. And so many people, like 99% of people, would have tried to run and got shredded. Or they would have crawled into a ball and said, woe is me, I'm fucked. But the only thing he could control then was not whether he was going to die. He was going to die. It's how he was going to die.
Yeah.
So that's why I find it so inspiring, so stoic, because instead of just like, hey, he grabs a little bottles of booze and he breaks them and he ties them to his hand and he's like, I'm going down like I'm like a stoic. I'll just go ahead and say it. Like I'm fighting to the end. And
Yeah.
if I get shredded by this alpha wolf and every other wolf in here, at least I'm going
Yeah.
down swinging, man.
Yeah.
That's so. I think you can use stoicism for your everyday life ups and downs. I think you could use it for your most significant failures. And I
Yeah.
think you can use it all the way to the end, even when there's no hope.
Yeah.
Like like you get to choose how you react to the situations that presents themselves. And that includes death.
Yes.
And we're all going to die. So you
Mm-hmm.
can either go, like I think Aurelius said, death smiles upon us all. All we can do is smile back. That's what
Yeah.
I'm talking about, right? All the
Yeah.
way to the end. So this can be, from when you screw up in school to when you get fired from your job or you don't make it in an academic pursuit and you have to get back on the saddle, all the way up to death, which you
Yeah.
might not be able to determine how it's going to happen, but you can determine how you're going to react to it and how you're going to face it. That's a dramatic example, the gray, right?
Sure.
But
I think it's
everybody's
still
going to face
poignant.
it. Yeah.
Yes, and everybody will face it, and I think that's the important thing, right? Like so much of this comes down to the fact that like we have to remember that stuff's going to go awry, right? To speak in Shakespearean language, or stuff's going to go to shit. It just
Mm-hmm.
happens, right? I mean, you're in a meeting and you present something and it turns out that's not what they wanted to hear. Or you're talking to a friend and it turns out they're cheating on you with your partner or whatever, right? Like so many things will happen and so many and those are in there themselves the extreme example, but even the simple thing of like I was going to go for a run, now it's raining, right? Like those are all things that can show you where your toughness lies and whether or not you have the ability to be tough, right? And it comes down to that choice. What one of the things I love to remember from Marcus, from his quotes, is he sort of says, if I had to be anything, I would want to be a boxer, just to circle back to what you were saying at the beginning, because he says, if I'm a gladiator, I have to pick up a sword and a shield, right? I
Mm-hmm.
need other things to help me get through this tough moment. But when I am a boxer, I need only clench my fists,
Mm-hmm.
meaning I can rely, like in that some way you have to remind yourself, I can rely on myself to do this. I can rely
Mm-hmm.
on the tools that I have built for myself, the
Great
choices
quote.
that I have made, right? I need only clench my fists to have my tools and my weapons at my disposal. And I think that's something that I really try to remember, right? Like you and I have both talked about practices we have. I think you do a little bit of journaling, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember though. I'm a journaler myself, but I also I have a meditative practice and stuff like that because but that's kind of it. I think also a lot of people think this stuff is like you and I are sort of chanting for 12 hours a day. We really don't. Like, I don't think you chant, right?
Oh,
I don't, but people think that that's what this takes, but it ultimately comes down to the choices we make, right? And the resilience that we have is built up over time of having stuff go wrong and learning about it and that it's okay. No human being goes through life in a perfect environment without, you know, marring surfaces and dings and nicks and scratches and scrapes. I mean, I got a fresh scar on my elbow from a roller ski crash from about 4 weeks ago, right?
hmm.
I'm still roller skiing today, right? I didn't say
Yep.
no. I got back up and tried to keep moving forward on it. I don't ski that direction anymore on the road because it's a really bad part of the road. But,
Yeah, resilience
that's
doesn't
different.
mean keep pounding your head against the wall, right? I mean,
Exactly. That's another thing.
you go around you. Um, yeah, and so I got about 10 minutes before I have to go get ready to
Yeah,
talk. Uh,
I'm keeping an eye
no,
on the
I'm
clock.
bringing this up on the podcast because what am I going to be talking about? I'm going to be talking about Ukraine. I already
Yeah.
mentioned Zelensky, right? But you want to talk about resilience,
Yeah.
right? So I was on the air when the Russians invaded in February of 22. And I'm
Mhm.
telling you, because I talk to analysts all the time, because I am a national security analyst. And
Yeah.
they were like 3 weeks, others were like 3 days. Russia's going to be rolling into Kiev,
Yeah.
and it's going to be over. Well, it's 3.5 years later, and they've taken 20% of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it's largely, and this is a country who is 4 times greater in population and 28 times greater in geography.
Mhm.
And it really came down to the resilience of the Ukrainian people, why we're still talking about a ceasefire, and not the complete absorption of the
Yeah.
democratic country of Ukraine into it. So there's real life, and it's not just Zelensky. Zelensky, I think, is a good representation. In fact, I was told by somebody who knew when they crossed the line of departure and went into Ukraine, the U.S. basically pleaded him to leave.
Yeah.
They said, "Hey, they're going to send Spetsnaz. They're going to kill you. That's the first thing they're going to do." And he famously said, I don't need a ride. I need more ammunition." Right. So
Yeah.
these are really dramatic examples, but it's something I think everybody can relate to because unless you're living under a rock, you understand what's happening in Ukraine.
Well,
But it
also if
does show
someone
you
I
how
think also
much
if someone
resilience can matter.
yeah, it can matter. And also, like if someone can be resilient like that in probably the most primal moments of being human, survival, right? Doing it in the day to day when you get in a car accident, when your partner leaves you, when you get fired, that is a drop in the bucket of what of the total type of human experience where you can use resilience and toughness. So, well, but sorry, I spoke over you there. Apologize about that. But yeah, I think we should probably wrap it up there. That was a really great conversation. I appreciate your time today, Mick. Um, but you need to get off, and I have to get on to some of my tasks for this Saturday. So
Yeah,
we'll
great
say,
discussion. A lot of these are
yeah.
going to come back, back and back, obviously, because I intend to
Hmm.
do this for the next 45 years, which will put me at 110. Probably not going to live that long. But my point being is we're going to be talking about resilience many,
Yeah.
many, many times over. And you asked about journaling. So one thing I do that, folks in the audience might want to do too is I doodle, I write stuff. And then eventually when I kind of really hit on something, I write an essay, which is a form of journaling. And what we
Yeah.
intend to do is have our own Substack on for Pub and Porch
Yes.
Applied Stoicism. So,
Hmm.
because we want this to be interactive, we're not professors of philosophy, and we're not speaking to you from Oxford or Trinity. We're
No.
talking to you from our houses, and we're talking to you with humility in the sense that, I mean, we don't really know more than probably many people that are listening to us right now. So
Yeah.
we'd like this to be interactive. And if you want to spend the time to write an essay on some of this, let us know. And then
Hmm.
we will have, in fact, we already have our email, right? If
Yes.
you want to remind everybody
Yeah,
about
so the
that.
email is info@pubandporch.com.
There you go. Send it
And
to us.
yeah, by the time this episode goes out, the website should be up. So
Yeah.
should be able to see a little bit more info on what's going on.
Be a bit patient with us. It's just me and Adam. We don't have a
Yeah.
staff.
And we both
And
have full-time jobs. So
we both have full-time jobs, but please do it. We want this to be a team. We want it to be a team that we go through and, if we make mistakes, obviously point it out, but we'd
yeah,
love to have people participate and have the ability to, that could be a form of journaling, write an essay and send it to Pub and Porch.
yeah, totally agree. Okay, well, looking forward to the next one, absolutely. And until then, we'll sign off. So thanks, Mick, and thanks, everybody.
Thanks, my
We'll
friend.
see you on the next one.
See you on the next one. Cilantro. Thank you for listening to the Pub and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pubandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pubandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pub and Porch out.